The chairs were already set up, 32 of them. White folding chairs arranged in neat rows across the small garden behind the ceremony hall. Soft music played through the speakers. The evening sun hung low over the trees, casting long shadows across the grass. Everything was ready, except the people. I kept checking the entrance gate. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The officiant looked at his watch. My friend beside me squeezed my arm gently. "Maybe traffic," she whispered, but I already knew the truth, because an hour earlier my phone had filled with the same message from 3 different relatives. "Sorry, the drive is just too tiring today." 2 hours. That was the distance they refused to travel. I stood there quietly, staring at 32 empty chairs and wondering how the same family had managed to fly 13 hours across the country just a month earlier. A month earlier, the family group chat had been buzzing. Photos of plane tickets, screenshots of hotel reservations, my mother sending long voice messages about how excited she was. "Your sister's twins deserve the biggest celebration," she kept saying. The gender reveal was being held in California. My sister had moved there 2 years earlier with her husband. A beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood, the kind with wide driveways and palm trees lining the streets. And suddenly the entire family was planning a cross-country trip. My parents flew in from New Jersey. 2 of my uncles came from Pennsylvania. Even my aunt, who constantly complained about back pain, managed the long flight. Have you ever watched people move mountains for someone and wondered quietly why those same mountains never move for you? The reveal itself was enormous. Pink and blue balloons everywhere. A dessert table covered in cupcakes and cookies. A professional photographer moving around the yard capturing every moment. My sister stood in the center wearing a flowing white dress, one hand resting proudly on her stomach. Everyone hovered around her, as if she had become the center of gravity for the entire family. When the confetti cannon went off and pink powder filled the air, my mother actually started crying. "2 girls," she shouted, hugging my sister tightly. Everyone cheered. Phones came out, videos were recorded, champagne glasses clinked together. I smiled along with them. Because what else do you do in moments like that? Later that evening, while people gathered around the dinner table, my aunt asked me something casually. "So when is your ceremony again?" "Next month," I said. I even mentioned the date, the exact address, the little garden venue we had rented. My mother nodded. "Of course we'll be there." She said it easily, the way people promise things when they assume the future will simply arrange itself. At the time, I believed her. Why wouldn't I? After all, this was the same family that had just traveled 13 hours across the country for a party. But a month later, when the day actually arrived, 2 hours suddenly became too far. Looking back now, the signs had been there long before that ceremony day. Small moments, quiet ones, the kind that are easy to ignore if you want to believe everything is normal. For years, family plans seemed to orbit around my sister. Birthdays, holidays, weekend dinners. If she suggested something, everyone adjusted their schedules immediately. If I suggested something, the responses were slower. "Let's see. Maybe next week. We'll figure it out." At first, I didn't question it. Families have rhythms. Some people are louder, more demanding, more comfortable asking for attention. My sister had always been that person. She knew how to command a room. Even as children, she had this natural ability to pull everyone toward her. Teachers noticed her, relatives praised her, conversations often drifted in her direction without anyone realizing it. And I adapted. Like anyone who has ever grown up next to someone who shines brighter in the family's eyes. You learn to step back. You learn to celebrate quietly. You learn not to compete, but every once in a while a moment would slip through that made me pause. Like the time my graduation dinner got postponed because my sister's friend had a birthday that same weekend. Or when my parents canceled a visit with me because my sister needed help organizing her baby shower. Little things. Nothing dramatic. Nothing big enough to complain about without sounding petty. Have you ever noticed how favoritism rarely shows up in obvious ways? It hides inside reasonable explanations. Busy schedules, bad timing, simple misunderstandings. Each moment on its own looks harmless. But over time, the pattern becomes harder to ignore. Still, when I invited everyone to my ceremony, I told myself it would be different. This was important. This was my moment. Surely this time the family would show up. After all, it was only a 2-hour drive. And everyone had known the date for weeks. Yet on the morning of the ceremony, the messages started arriving. One after another. Sorry, the drive feels too long today. Your father isn't feeling up to traveling. We'll celebrate another time. I stared at the screen as each message appeared. Not angry. Just quiet. Because deep down, a question had already started forming. Had they ever really planned to come at all? The pattern became clear slowly. Not in one dramatic moment, not with shouting or confrontation. Just small realizations that stacked on top of each other until they became impossible to ignore. The first realization came that same evening after my ceremony. While I was helping the venue staff fold chairs, my phone buzzed with a notification. My cousin had posted something online. A photo. The entire family was gathered around my parents' dining table. Pizza boxes, laughter, wine glasses raised in the air. The caption read, "Family Night." I stared at the screen for a long moment. 2 hours had been too exhausting for them earlier that day. But apparently a full evening together wasn't. I didn't comment. I didn't send a message. What would I even say? Sometimes silence feels easier than explaining disappointment. But something inside me shifted that night. A quiet awareness. Like adjusting your eyes after walking into a dark room. Start seeing things differently. I began remembering other moments. My birthday last year when half the family canceled at the last minute. The holiday dinner where my sister arrived late, but everyone waited to start eating until she showed up. The way conversations often paused when I tried to share something important but resumed immediately when she spoke. None of it had felt intentional before. But now the pieces started lining up. Have you ever realized that people don't always ignore you loudly? Sometimes they just don't notice you enough. And the result feels exactly the same. That night, after the last chair was packed away and the garden lights turned off, I drove home quietly. The roads were nearly empty. Streetlights passing across the windshield in slow, steady intervals. I kept thinking about those 32 empty chairs. 32 seats meant for family. Seats that stayed empty not because of distance but because of priorities. And for the first time, a simple question crossed my mind. If they didn't make space for me in their lives, why was I still trying so hard to make space for them in mine? The first week after the ceremony passed quietly. No one mentioned the empty chairs. No one brought up the messages from that morning. Instead, the family group chat continued like everything was normal. My mother shared photos from my sister's doctor appointment. My aunt posted recipes. Someone forwarded a video about parenting twins. Life moved forward as if my ceremony had never happened. Have you ever noticed how quickly people return to normal once the uncomfortable moment passes for them? At first I responded politely. Short replies, a few emojis. But slowly I started pulling back. Not dramatically. Just small changes. I stopped volunteering to organize family gatherings. I didn't remind anyone about birthdays. When someone asked for help planning an event, I politely said I was busy. For years I had been the one quietly holding things together. Sending reminders, booking reservations, making sure everyone felt included. When I stopped doing those things, the silence grew noticeable. One afternoon, my cousin Jenna called. "Hey, did something happen after your ceremony?" I paused for a moment. "What do you mean?" "Well, everyone thought you seemed distant lately." Distant? That word surprised me. Because from my perspective, nothing had changed. I had simply stopped doing the extra work. Have you ever realized people sometimes only notice you when you stop helping them? "I'm fine," I told her. And in a way, it was true. The absence of expectation felt lighter than I expected. Weekends became quieter. Evenings became calmer. Without constant family obligations filling every corner of my schedule, something unexpected appeared in my life. Space. Space to rest. Think. Space to decide what actually mattered. But families have a strange reaction to distance. They don't always notice it right away. And when they finally do, the reaction can be sudden. Because 32 days after that ceremony, my phone suddenly exploded with notifications. It started at 6:12 in the morning. My phone buzzed once. Then again. Then again. At first I assumed it was one of those group chat storms where someone sends a message and everyone reacts with emojis. But when I reached for the phone, the screen was already filled with missed calls. Mom, Dad, my aunt, 2 cousins. Messages stacked on top of each other so quickly they were pushing older ones off the screen. I unlocked the phone. The first text from my mother read, "Please call us." The next one came 30 seconds later. "Where are you?" Another message followed from my father. "We need to talk." Then the calls started again. Have you ever watched people panic over something they never thought would actually happen? By 7 a.m., my phone showed numbers I had never seen before. 30 missed calls. Then 50. Then more messages began arriving from relatives who rarely contacted me. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Is this real?" "Call us back immediately." I sat there quietly with my coffee, watching the notifications pile up. Not angry. Just curious. Because whatever had happened, they were clearly shocked. By mid-morning, the number had climbed to over 100 messages. Voicemails began appearing, too. My aunt's voice sounded breathless in one of them. "You can't just disappear like this." Disappear. That word made me pause. Because I hadn't disappeared at all. I had simply stepped back. Exactly the way they asked me to. Have you ever followed someone's request perfectly, only to watch them panic when the results become real? Around noon, I finally opened the family group chat. It was chaos. Questions everywhere. Speculation. Screenshots of something none of them seemed able to fully understand. And suddenly the reason for the panic became clear. 32 days earlier, they had decided I wasn't important enough to drive 2 hours for. But today they were realizing something else entirely. Something they hadn't considered before. That the person they ignored had quietly built a life that no longer depended on them at all. I didn't answer any of the calls that morning. Not because I was angry, because I wanted to understand what had caused the panic first. So I opened the messages more carefully. One screenshot kept appearing again and again in the chat. A link. An announcement page from the small foundation I had been quietly building for the past year. At the top of the page was a simple statement. The New Horizons Education Fund has officially launched. Below it was a photo from the ceremony garden. The same place where 32 chairs had once sat empty. But now the space looked different. Full. Students, teachers, community members. The small program I had been developing for years had finally gone public. Scholarships, mentorship programs, local education support. And suddenly the family was seeing something they had never asked about before. The scale of it. Have you ever noticed how people become curious about your life only after they realize how much they missed? Another voicemail appeared. This one from my father. His voice sounded confused. Why didn't you tell us about this? I set the phone down for a moment. Because the answer was simple. They'd never asked. For years, conversations had revolved around my sister's milestones. Her moves, her pregnancy, her celebrations. Meanwhile, my work had quietly grown in the background. Not hidden. Just overlooked. And when the family decided I should stay away, they unknowingly created the silence that allowed everything else to grow. Without distraction. Without expectation. Without needing approval. By the time I picked up the phone again, the messages had reached 200. Some curious. Some apologetic. Some confused. But they all carried the same tone. Realization. Because distance does something powerful. It gives people time to see what was standing quietly beside them all along. By the evening, the calls had slowed. Not stopped, just slowed. The initial panic had passed, and what remained were quieter messages. Ones that sounded more careful. More uncertain. My mother left another voicemail around 7:40 p.m. This one was different from the others. Her voice was softer. We didn't realize how much you had been doing. I sat on the balcony while the sky turned orange over the city. The same balcony where I had spent countless evenings working through plans, budgets, and ideas for the program that had finally launched. No one from the family had seen those nights. The long hours. The quiet determination. The small steps that slowly turned into something meaningful. But that was the strange part about growth. Sometimes it happens completely outside the view of the people who once doubted you. Another message arrived from my aunt. Short this time. Can we talk? I read it, then placed the phone on the table beside me. Because for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to rush back into those conversations. Have you ever realized that distance doesn't always break relationships? Sometimes it simply shows you which ones were never built on understanding in the first place. The truth was simple. They'd asked me to stay away. And I had respected that. But in the quiet space they created, something else had happened. I had built a life that didn't require their approval anymore. Not out of revenge. Not out of anger. Just growth. Sometimes the most powerful response isn't confrontation. It's simply moving forward so far that the people who once overlooked you suddenly have to catch up. And when they finally do, they realize the silence they created was never empty. It was just the sound of someone quietly becoming stronger. What would you have done in that moment? Comment below.